Hey everybody, this is Nick Wenka from thehyperloops.com, and today I'm going to bring you my list for the top 5 cards from Standard that need rebalancing. Before I start, I'd like you to please like this video and subscribe to our channel if you own or have done so. That helps us out, provide content for you fine people. So without further ado, please check out the first card. Now this is a hot one here because it's already been errated, and I'm going to give you the reasons why. It is the most annoying card to play against out of mill, and my fear is that if you end up nerfing or balancing cards in Chopper, you may actually end up with a metagame that will be very mill-centric. And of the cards I was thinking about that are by far the most annoying and the most powerful, it's probably, the characters themselves, if you're talking about Yoda Leia. But this is the card that really is super, super annoying to play against because it's a guessing game of whether or not they'll have it. If they don't have it and you discard your last card just to play around it, that feels bad. It just creates this giant tension in the game. Also with Resistance Ring, it's stupid. You can play this card 4 times in a game sometimes. And, when they have Resistance Ring, they will be able to play it and you'll know about it, but it's still just ridiculous. It's just such a good card, even with the change that they made, which was now they need to discard the last card in order to get the 3. And that deck doesn't have too much of a problem discarding all the cards. And you still need to play cards for your turn, so I'm just worried that if they do make any balances to the force, nerfs, resistant, put cards on the restricted list, that mill will just be too good. And so I've assembled a list of fixes for all these cards, and my fix for this one is the first one that would be the least harmful to this card would be to remove itself after the use, which would limit its use to just 2. I don't like this one. I think we need to go a little further. I just like no answer being discard a random card from an opponent's hand. That's it. Just cut the other text out. All it does is 1 cost, discard a card from your opponent's hand at random. You still get the Resistance Ring value, and you can play around. Now you don't have to play around it. You can still play around if it's your last card and you think they have it. You can discard a reroll to get some value, but it won't be so punishing if you decide to keep the last card in your hand. So moving right along, the next card here is Ewok Ambush. And now, at the end of this video, a little teaser, is I have a hot take, which I won't try to tip my hand to too much right now, but I'll get to it later. But essentially, Ewok Ambush is one of the big problematic cards, one of the problematic negative play experiences, because you really can't, out of Chopper droids, you can't really interact with their dice and the damage that they're doing. It's kind of like the old Sabine, you'll just take 6 damage as their first action and your character dies and you didn't get to do anything. And some decks can absorb this and not have it be that big of a deal, but others just can't. And so there are plenty of cards that you could point to from Chopper droids as being problematic, and I think Ewok Ambush wouldn't destroy the deck. It would make it worse. I don't love touching things like Faithful Companion or touching the droids again. I don't love that sort of stuff. The easy fix for Ewok Ambush in the current metagame is just to put it on the restricted list. So you can't play it with C-3PO, which means that you won't be able to play it when you play C-3PO and R2-D2. That problem solved. Very easy for this current format. Now the issue is, potentially the issue, is in the next set we'll have piloting. And when you have a single die pilot with Ewok Ambush, you might be able to do some pretty silly stuff. I haven't looked into it too much, but in my mind, this kind of creates another issue. So you may want to just be the flavor fix of Ewok Ambush is just Ewok. Like, you can activate any Ewok. I find this to be a less elegant, an elegant fix, because you're just cutting out a piece of the text. But if it's just up to 3 your Ewoks, it kind of does what it was supposed to do in the first place. The card was never really meant to do the kind of things that it's doing now. And even still, you will have chances to do sort of the disruptive, not disruptive, well, you can do the disruptive bit. But you'll also be able to do the first action, kill a character via other cards that droids has access to. Excuse me. So that's my basic thought. I don't really want to touch too much in droids. I think a lot of people have spent money and time playing and collecting those droid cards, and I think, I'm not even like a droids player, but I like having an archetype like that accessible. I think the other card you could touch is maybe Faithful Companions, make it cost one more. That card's obviously just ridiculous. I think C-3PO at 9/11 is fine. It's just like, I just don't want to touch those cards. I like them. You could touch something like Salvage Arm maybe and make the deck a little bit worse. You could touch something like Flee the Scene, which at the rate for a deck that can go really fast is just insane. Like, just removing 2 dice for 1, and any 2 dice is just insane. Like, you lose your next 2 actions, but that deck just very, very efficient, so it doesn't need that many actions to do all of its damage. Or at least it can take more actions before your opponent really gets to do anything. So I think Ewok Ambush is a good candidate for the restricted list. It's very easy for this current format, but we might have a problem with piloting in the future. So we could just go with eliminate single die character or non-elite characters and just have 3 Ewoks being the only thing you can Ewok Ambush with. All right, number 3, we've got Delve, and Delve is just, the big issue with Delve is just, it's an issue for future design when they want to make really powerful big things, but being able to just pay 3 to get those big things out. And this is sort of like a teaser for sort of next things to come that are on the list, but we have that issue with Vader's Fist right now, is you can pay 3 and just roll it in and just do an insane amount of damage just for 3 resources. So I don't know what the Delve fixes honestly are. I was thinking about ways you can fix it. Maybe it's you can have the card come in exhausted. So it could be either the support upgrade comes into play exhausted, which would obviously make putting Invader's Fist much worse. Still would probably be okay. And then it's just, I think at that point you kind of make the card too bad. You can do stuff like where you put it on the restricted list and then start putting all the other big things that are good to delve in with it. I don't love that either, just because it basically creates more actions in the future from research and development to be like, okay, well, we can print it and we'll just put that card along with Delve in there. And a lot of these fixes, like example, like no answer for the Infinite format, that card's obviously a problem there too. Huge problem. Yoda Leia is considered to be the best deck in that format. So I think if you also removed in that format as well. So I think Delve also could potentially be a problem in other formats as well. So I don't know. Delve is kind of a weird one because I don't really have a great way to fix it. And I don't think it's necessarily the card you need to fix. Currently, I think you could touch other cards and it would be fine. But in future sets, you're going to have an issue with, you're going to have the problem with the big things. And I think just creating cards like, Millennium Falcon, for example, like that's a hero, but playing a card of Millennium Falcon type card for villain off of Delve, that would just be great. Like, you would do that 100%. So yeah, so I don't know. It's Delve is a weird one. I don't really have a great fix for it. I just know that these kind of cards are problematic for design because it costs 3. It hasn't been a problem yet, so you could touch it and touch other cards. So we'll move on. But I think it's a good candidate to be touched in some way. Basically, like the problem with I can come up with a bunch of ways to fix it that would make it worse. Like you can make it cost 4. That's just not very elegant because it's just I don't know, it's ugly to me. I mean, it'll be fine if it cost 4. It'd be it would be definitely worse. You could have the exhaust thing. I think would be okay. Yeah, those are my two big things. I think the exhaust one would probably be fine. You still can't make big upgrades like that. Like we do have some really nasty upgrades coming, but a lot of those do require like pretty gnarly sort of things to do when you exhaust them. So I think that would be fine. Moving right along, we have number 2. Oh well, I guess of this top 5 list, this is second place. And Desperate Measures is definitely a problematic card. It's just too cheap. It's too good. It's just yeah. I mean that's just it. It's just too cheap and too good for what it does. And we have the future cards coming with piloting, and that's just going to be a disaster. If this card is just the same way, it's just going to make a lot of piloting strategies kind of unplayable. It's just be like, oh, well, I just have Desperate Measures, and my whole cute thing that I was doing, it just kind of goes down the pooper. So, possible fixes for this card are you could make it, you can make spot 2 yellow characters. So then you sort of create like a DM archetype, for example, because you have like, oh, I have to play 2 yellow characters. And then maybe you create something that's like too good, for example. I mean, maybe it's still too good, but at least it's like, okay, this particular double yellow deck or double yellow and another color. You can't play 3 colors. You're forced to play like 2 colors and then a third. Or you have to play like a bunch of crappy colors and like 2 other colors. You could go like 4 wide with like, Greedo and like an 8 and then like 2 7s or something. I don't know. Just something like that. It would be worse. So you'd have to like flex. It'd have to be more. It would be more limiting in deck building. I don't hate that as a way of sort of incentivizing you to be more monochromatic. Because we have cards like that now, but they're just not good enough. And then you have this card that's just like spot a yellow character, and it's free. You want it early in those matchups, so if they kill your yellow character after, it's not the end of the world. And later on, the card gets worse because you end up taking indirect, and that damage ends up mattering more. And a lot of those supports have been doing a bunch of damage already, so it kind of doesn't make sense in a lot of those situations. Another potential fix that you could do for this card is you could make it like a converted resource cost for the actual upgrade support. So you could have something like 2 or less, or 1 or less, or something like that. I think 2 or less. I think 2 or less is a good sweet spot. That sort of creates a little metagame of you playing things that cost 3. It's still a fantastic card, but it's more of a metagame specific card, like what you expect. I think at costing 2 or less, you'd have it be like an automatic 1 of and like an Afro deck, because you're like, okay, well, I play that matchup and I'll get it for that matchup. But in a lot of other matchups, your opponent can just play around it and be like, okay. Then when you do that, you make Armored Reinforcements better because you can get like a support that costs 3 or more, and then you can dodge that hate. So that's an interesting fix. It's not super elegant. The 2 yellow ones is also not the most elegant. You're changing the text. Restricted lists are also problematic because you just have to kind of like put it in a bunch of good yellow characters with it, and that doesn't make any sense to me. I think 2 or less is probably something like that's going to be the most likely thing, because they may, if you do 2 or less, it's like you know what you're getting and you can design, and the metagame will sort of evolve around that. And 2 or like if you have spot 2, then that also becomes kind of a crapshoot of like, okay, is someone going to play this deck? It's not particularly great against anything else except for mine, so it becomes like a metagame call. I don't hate any of those two things. It spices things up, which is nice. Either one of those I'd be fine with. And number 1, Big Daddy Vader's Fist. Oh boy. I remember when we were all salivating over this card. It was just too powerful. Just for 5. Okay, so 5 resources, you get a card that does 9 damage. Optimally, not all the time, but optimally it does that much damage. Sometimes it'll do 6 and you get 2 shields. That's also fine. So the issue here is, number 1, the action cheat, the cheating of resources with Delve. We saw a big change over from the way the fist decks were built during the Jabbaning, like you just had decks that were dedicated to cast fist and big supports become bad, and it ended up being because Watt ended up being just not good enough, and also all of these other support decks that could play fist and delve just end up doing more damage because their characters have actual damage sides as opposed to just a bunch of resource sides. And the resource sides of cards like Jabba and Watto were still a little, you could interact with them to screw people over, so you didn't have like this backup plan of doing damage. And also the decks like Aphra and Forlome can play a bunch of little things to supplement the Vader's Fist plan, so you don't necessarily have to go all in on that plan as opposed to like the Jabba decks, which you had to, and that was easier to disrupt. So that's a bit of a tangent. It's just too powerful. Even at 5, it's still too good. I think and it's also just problematic because it makes cards like Delve like way too good. I don't know. I think that you could go either way in some kind of capacity to make it harder to play this card. You kind of have to go all in. You still have cards like No Good to Me Dead, which is a fantastic card for a fist deck, especially for an Aphra deck. So I think you just need to make this card worse. There are plenty of ways to just get resources and play this card, and it's not. I don't think that's the issue as much as it is Vader's fisting. Because it's just, it does 9 damage. It can do 9 damage in round 1. By round 2, it does like 15. That's, if you want to just quantitate it quickly, that's a 15-point character over the course of 2 rounds, and that's just, that's half of a deck. Like, come on, that's ridiculous. It's absurd. So, possible fixes. You could do something like a flavor fix, additionally, where the roll only happens if you spot Vader. Or you could make it so the power action can only roll it in if you spot Vader. You could also have something like they did with Maul's Saber, where the power action has to cost 1 to roll it in, so it ends up being progressively more expensive. And the first time you play it, it will be harder. Even still, playing, if you have to pay retail for Vader's Fist, it's sometimes hard to get to those that money for the additional die. You could have the power action be cost 1, or the roll-in being cost 1. Obviously, the roll-in being better, making it a softer nerf. I think if you make the power action cost 1, it's pretty brutal for the card. So I don't know. I think the thing that would touch it the least would definitely be the roll-in costing an additional 1. But it still might be too good. But I don't know. It's one of those things that it depends on how hard R&D, nerfing committee, restrictive community, I think that any kind of restricted list for Vader's Fist doesn't make any sense, because then you have to put a bunch of other, things that create resources on it, and it doesn't make any sense. So flavor fix, or the costing of the come into playability or the power action. All right, now that my next take is going to be really hot, and I need to drink some water just to cool down before, because I'm thinking about it. And oh, buddy. Ooh. Here it is. Rebalancing is good for the game. Now, I think a lot of people might read that and be like, well, obviously, Nick, that's really obvious. Like, things are just like, if they're too good, then you change. But no. I'm talking about just regularly rebalancing the game to change the metagame, as opposed to releasing sets. And I think what this does is it lets the company release sets less, which helps players, financially. So I don't have to go and buy. Instead, maybe I can get later be like 2 sets a year, 3 sets a year instead of like 4. So instead of doing that, you have changes. So you have what they've been doing recently, which, I think has been pretty good, honestly. Like, we have Matt Holland came on saying that there was going to be a rebalancing before the next set. And that's great. Fantastic. I'm really glad that I don't have to play this format for all of the upcoming store champs, hopefully. I mean, if it comes soon, I hope it comes this week. I'm going to put this video out as soon as I can, because I know the next day or the day that it's going up, there's going to be the rebalancing, and I'm going to be like, this makes you look like an idiot, and I don't want that. So I just think that regularly rebalancing, kind of like what they do in X-Wing, I wish that they would get on board with what they did with Infinite, where they changed character costs. And I think hopefully in the future of Destiny, they'll have the character costs in, some, online, or, when you buy them. It's just, I don't know. I'm fine with them being printed costs, right? But I'm also fine with them changing it for the competitive landscape, because competitive players, they'll be tuned in, they'll know. And that's totally fine. It's totally fine. I think it's okay at FFG to do that. So, aggressive rebalancing, it's kind of like when they patch things in video games. You ever had a video game and then you just kind of just patch things to mix it up? I play a lot of Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, and they repatch things, they make characters better, that sort of thing. And I think that that's exciting. That makes it, okay, so let me go revisit this character. Or, if they do a bunch of changes and they're like, okay, we're going to make Kylo 2 cost 16 instead of 17, they'd be like, oh, well, that makes sense. They want to sort of make it so it's like a metagame thing for Reylo. And I think that those changes would help the longevity of the game, because there's just there's too much dead space between releases sometimes. And I think they've approached this in this way, maybe not intentionally, but because the sets have just been delayed. So I think that doing this, it might not be good for their bottom line, but it would be good for the competitive player.